Recently, our conversations at Acacia have been changing, and we've been having some really insightful discussions about not only education but the sectors in which we work. What we want to do is take the opportunity to share these conversations wider and engage more people in those conversations. And so this is the first of a series of discussions that you will see us putting out into the world, and hopefully you will choose to engage with, that are really important that we have and we enable to make sure we can all move forward together. So this morning I'm welcoming Stacey because we're going to start talking about our sector in terms of adult health and social care and childcare, and actually the biggest challenge they face in terms of recruitment and retention, what that looks like, the conversations we're having, and maybe some of the things and solutions that Stacey, as an expert in recruitment, is discussing with our partner organisations. So morning, Stacey. Thank you ever so much for joining me.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So do you want to start by just introducing yourself, what it is you do, and the kind of really telling us about what the biggest challenges you see are in the sector at the moment?
Absolutely. So as Amy's already said, my name's Stacey. I've worked in recruitment for about 13 or so years now, and 11 of those years have been within health and social care. So I've recruited permanent staff, temporary staff, from care and support worker level right through to managerial and exec level roles, working with small independent organisations and your large corporates. So there aren't many scenarios that I haven't come across. But I think it's fair to say that this last 18 months, 2 years have been the most challenging markets for attracting candidates, retaining candidates that I've ever seen. So hence why these conversations that I'm having with new and existing clients have changed so dramatically. It's not necessarily about we need to hire and we need to hire fast. It's more about our budgets are spread too thin to hire. We need a better trained workforce and a succession plan to future-proof our business, basically. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Can you tell us actually what the state of affairs looks like in terms of what those statistics look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So as of 2023 to 2024, there were approximately 1.84 million posts in the health and social care sector, with 131,000 vacancies. So that's a vacancy rate of 8.3%, which is about 3 times higher than the whole economy's average. So to address that, naturally, you can see from the figures, that's a problem, it's a challenge. Why are those vacancies vacant? Have people left the sector? Is it growth? And a lot of the feedback I get is people have left the sector. Candidates, I speak to them daily, they're leaving the sector for reasons that we'll go into. So to address these challenges, it is essential that we focus on strategies that not only attract the talent, but that will help you retain them and progress them through your organisation. So yeah, this is what we hope to cover off here, and hopefully it will give you some kind of invaluable ideas of how you can strengthen your own workforce.
Well, thank you. Okay, so if we look to how you would recruit and how you would advise others to recruit, we've been talking about a shift, and you've already mentioned it in terms of that recruiting for now because we're desperate for people, or recruiting for the long term and how we take people on that journey. So we've very much had a conversation about the difference between recruiting for behaviours and values rather than solely recruiting for skills. So can you tell us a bit about that and what the difference is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I did a recent poll on LinkedIn to see what hiring managers were doing when it comes to interviewing, and whether they are just kind of having general informal conversations with their candidates, or whether they're using a more structured competency-based interview, for example, or whether it's a mix of the two. And a lot of hiring managers are still using kind of informal chats, so a telephone call, a Teams, and then a face-to-face meeting. which is fine. You need to know that the kind of natural personality of a candidate is going to fit well with the team and work well with the management structure, etc. However, I do feel that there's still a place for competency-based interviews in there. If you are structuring the questions around an individual's values and their ethics, and how they demonstrate compassion and empathy and resilience, and putting the scenarios in that help draw out those situational circumstances that highlight the value you're looking to recruit for. On paper, someone can have all of the qualifications that you think you need. You could have the highest level in management training, and they've hold every other qualification known to man. However, if they've been in the industry for quite some time, are they disillusioned? Have they become complacent? And if you're not testing those kind of pressure points, you won't know until they're in the business. So there may well be managers or deputies, for example, who haven't got the highest level of qualification, but their passion to really provide the best possible care and service and leadership to your team is absolutely second to none. They just haven't had the support of an employer or been given the right guidance of what they need to do to be able to progress in their training journey and development journey. So it's absolutely crucial, in my opinion, that there's a nice blend of personal interaction and kind of general chit chat so you can get to understand somebody, but use the competency-based interview questions to really draw out those situational based experiences so you can judge whether those values truly align personally.
Okay, so not to put you on the spot then at all, what kind of questions or what kind of scenario-based example questions would you give? Because I'm totally in agreement with you. If you say to somebody in the care sector, tell me about the 6 C's, they can reel them off because that's what they know, that's what they do, they've gained qualifications. But if you say to somebody, can you give me an example of when you've demonstrated compassion? Somebody can't prepare for that unless they've got a real true example. So you are getting that, you know, I'm all for it. But what kind of questions would you use or would you advise people to use in that situation?
Brilliant. So it doesn't even need to be a really complex question. It can be as simple as, let's take an adult service, for example, an elderly care home, and there's a member, an elderly person has been in a situation, and the family member who comes to visit them is quite disgruntled about it, doesn't think that it's been handled properly, and this, that, the other. How would you interact with that family member to resolve the situation? And it's just seeing where that conversation goes. Some people might be quite matter of fact and present, well, I'll show them that we've recorded everything and documented it, and it's all down on paper and it's all on the system, so we did deal with it properly. Another person might say, well, I sat them down, I did them a cup of tea, I asked them what their issue was, asked them what they wanted us to, you know, what we could have done better, and got that feedback and built more of a rapport. Those answers are so different, but both will solve a problem. And it's just what works for you. Do you want someone who's kind of all about the black and white detail and we've got it on paper and the quality is important, or do you want someone that's going to nurture that family member, build a rapport, calm the situation down, and then back it up with the facts to say, look, you know, I appreciate what, you know, you're not happy, etc., etc. It's just to see how someone responds to it. And there's a whole host of things you could throw into the mix. It's younger persons services, especially, it's a very emotive environment and often very challenging. So you could use a scenario where a staff member potentially has been in a challenging situation with a young person and has come out really distraught. How would you deal with that situation? And then you start to look at their management style and how they react in a crisis, and have they got the best interest of both parties at heart, the young person and the staff member, and how you start to understand how their mind works when it comes to resolving issues with external customers and your internal kind of stakeholders, so their team. So there's lots of questions you could ask.
Tells you far more about the person, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And ultimately what we're trying to find is the right fit, aren't we? Because some companies will, have an ethos or, a working methodology which will very much be about that process, but it's all got to be down to that culture. And so that's going to tell you how somebody's going to fit into that culture, whether they're, there's so much to take from that. Yeah.
In addition to that, if you are the hiring manager, it's listening to the answer that a candidate gives. So if they're answering and they're saying, well, I would do, or I would have done, I would then encourage any hiring manager to say, okay, and what did you do? And to kind of get those real life lived experiences, if they've got them. If it's someone stepping up to a managerial position, you ask them a competency-based interview around leadership, they might not have a real life scenario. But if you're recruiting somebody in a managerial post, but they're using, I think I would have done this, it would be a good idea to do this. Just probe that little bit further and say, can you give me a real life example when you have done that? And start to look for those, I did, this is how I resolved it. So you're getting those lived experiences rather than circumstantial. That's another really good tip for getting to the core of what somebody's about.
Yeah, that's a really important one, because the thing being, if you don't listen to that level of detail, to what words are being used, what language is being used, you're making assumptions about what somebody's saying. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's hard sometimes, isn't it? Because candidates are very much, and I know I've done it. It's been a while since I've had an interview, but that I don't like talking about myself. So then you put me in a position when I have to talk about myself. I always talk about we did, so it is teasing those things out and making sure that you've got
and not
that
be
right
and encouraging your hiring managers to have the confidence to do that, because it is daunting. I've interviewed thousands of people, and sometimes it's so difficult to get the answers that you kind of are waiting for, without leading them down the path and kind of just dragging it out of them. So it's just training your hiring managers in interview skills and hiring skills and onboarding to know that it's okay to ask a question and just stop. So okay, that's a brilliant answer. Now, can you think of a time when you did that? And if they say, oh, well, I did do all of that. Oh, okay. Well, just talk me through it again and just see how they rephrase it. And in turn, you're giving that candidate more space and more confidence to talk about themselves without kind of just going, right, okay, and moving on. So you can come out of the interview thinking, I'm confident I've got everything I need from this person, and you can make a more informed decision on who really is the best fit. So that's why I say that there's a place for a blend of the two, that informal chat, because that warms everything up. Everyone's guard comes down a little bit, and then you go into the competency-based interviews and always explain to the candidate that that's what you're going to be doing. I'm going to be asking a series of competency-based questions. That means they will be situational based, etc., so that they're prepared and they know that they're going to be asked those kind of things. It just makes the whole experience more enjoyable on everyone's part, really.
Yeah. So there's a few things I'm hearing for there, kind of just to sum up that that sort of interview piece. That one, we've got to frame the interview in the right place. We've got to make sure our candidate is well prepared, that they know what kind of interview they're coming to. Two, we've got to remember it's their interview, not ours, and we need to stop talking sometimes, because we're all guilty of that sometimes. And as you say, fill in those silences, or we think we're giving the best opportunity, but actually the best opportunity is to give that space. And three, don't be afraid to ask the other question. So thankfully, we are a long way away from list of questions, and I must ask everybody the same question. Goodness me, let's not go back to those days. But it is asking that next question, because unless we ask that next question, we can't be actively listening to what that person's telling us and giving them the best opportunity. Fab. Okay. So I suppose I've come at this maybe in a wrong order then, because we've talked about the interviews, how we recruit for values and behaviours. But even before that, how do we make sure that we're attracting the right candidates with such high vacancy rates?
This is the biggest problem. It's even getting a candidate into interview, and it's even as a recruiter, and in all the years I've done it, it's harder now than ever just to find the candidates or get the application. Our ad responses are the lowest I think I've ever seen. So it's very much about going to market and trying to find candidates, especially at the kind, I'm talking here about the managerial end, because that's our space. But even when I've worked on projects more recently for clients looking for their care and support staff, yes, they get more responses, but they're not always the right kind of responses. So it's a very candidate short market. Children's residential services, I think it's a common, everyone knows in the industry just how dire that market is. It's exceptionally hard to find qualified registered managers. So when I'm speaking to clients, it's what puts you above your competitor, because this is still business. Yes, we're in a health and social care sector, and it's it's very emotive, and we want to add more to society and give people a better life. Ultimately, my clients are businesses, whether they're a charity or a private company. They're still trying to run a business and be better than somebody else. So it's really thinking about what makes you better. And with burnout being so high in the sector, people leaving because they've had really poor experiences, they've felt unsupported in their personal lives as well as their career, they're thinking, I just don't want to do it anymore. As an employer, it's vital that you're selling yourself as an employer of choice. So the biggest thing candidates come to me about, it's not about the money. It's am I going to be happy in this job? Am I going to be trusted to do my job? Am I going to be supported to do my job? So how as an employer are you going to position yourself in the market as somebody that can meet those kind of those requirements? And that comes from word of mouth from existing or ex-employees. It comes from your reviews online, if you're able to have reviews online. It comes from how you market yourself, your CQC and Ofsted inspections. So it is all encompassing, as well as how much overtime are people expected to work, how much on-call are people expected to do, have they got a deputy manager to support them, what's the senior leadership team and what's their involvement in this person's day-to-day role, how much autonomy is this person going to have, and really living and breathing those employer values, not just saying we will do this, we'll do this. How are you actually living and breathing them? Use case studies from your existing employees. Get one of them into an interview when you're speaking to candidates, when you get them that far. But if you've got an internal hiring team, make sure that they are all fully versed in exactly what will be attractive to a candidate, and that will be all of those things. Yes, the pay and the benefits, absolutely, but what else are we doing? We've got a clear succession plan, we've got a development plan, we've got this, and here's evidence of how we've delivered on it with this person who started at this level and is now here, and etc. It's all well and good having values, but it's getting across how you live and breathe them. So yes, I know us recruiters are annoying when we want to sit on a Teams call with you for an hour to get under the skin of your business, but this is exactly why we need to understand why would someone want to work for you? Why? And if you can't sell that, or if your team can't sell that, you're fighting a losing battle. You need to have this kind of golden thread through the business where everybody understands why they should want to work for you and why they should be coming to you, as opposed to the care home or extra care service or supported living service down the road. And everyone should be able to articulate that in a really confident and proud way. And if you're living and breathing your values, that bit is easy. It's just giving the people that are doing your recruiting, whether it's your recruiter, whether it's your internal team, whether it's your managers doing it themselves, the ability to, once they find a candidate, really sell the opportunity. So that, I guess, leads us nicely onto how do you find the candidates. Majority of my placements are coming from headhunting. So giving yourself access to the tools that enable you to do that. That can be a trusted recruitment partner or two or three. I'm not averse to people going to multiple if you want a couple of professionals. I think when we have clients come and say they've got 10 consultants on their PSL, all 10 are working on a vacancy, all 10 are fighting over the same very small pool of candidates. So there really is no need, and it just becomes a time exhaustive exercise to having to deal with 10 consultants all the time. So have a couple of trusted recruitment partners that will work to a budget that suits you, has bothered to take the time to get to know your business so that you've got confidence that they're selling you well and getting you the best candidates. If you've got an internal team, you've decided to take it in-house, which is more prevalent now than it's ever been. Trust me, I'm up against it every day. So I get it. I know that it's happening, and that's absolutely fine. And just it's ensuring that every single person in that internal talent acquisition team is passionately selling what you're about and has the access to those candidates. So you can't expect them to find candidates by just letting them post an Indeed advert. Invest in that Indeed CV search option, invest in LinkedIn Recruiter Lite so that they can actively go out and headhunt, but give them the tools to be able to do it effectively. Teach them how to use Boolean searches, teach them the keywords, tell them who your competitors are and who you would like to see candidates from. So I mean, I'm giving away all the recruitment secrets here. So
you are, yeah, you really are, Stacey.
so you know, but we are, you know, I'm very passionate about the sector, and it's a very tough market. I don't believe that by having internal talent acquisitions teams that as recruiters are going to go out of business, because there's a place for us in the market. But it's about having the tools to find the candidates. If when you are writing your adverts, highlight your benefits first. A registered manager of a service will know the duties of a registered manager. Yes, they'll want to know the state of the CQC, they'll want to know the size of the service, the size of the team, but ultimately they will want to know, well, what's in it for me? Because that's what they're there for.
Yeah, and well, ultimately that's human nature, isn't it? And
Yep.
I think one of the key things that I always come back to is those stories. You know, it's great to have on paper what all of these things are, but if you've got people, and whether it's through website, whether it's through social media, however you're sharing those, sharing the stories of real people in your world that are seeing the benefits of these, speak far more for what you do than an advert on a piece of paper will do.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. So one of the things that you keeps coming back to is giving people the tools, whether that be managers or whether that's an internal team, but also giving them the skills. So we've talked about it in terms of the interview, in terms of finding the talent, but you've also talked about all of those other benefits of being as part of an organisation. So how can care organisations better support their managers to create that positive, engaged workforce that means we're not going to need to rely on recruitment as much because we're keeping people within the business?
It's that I relies heavily on how you train them, how you develop them, and how much confidence you instill in them from either the get-go, or if you've got long-serving managers and you're just looking at a bit of a strategic overhaul, it's about having space and time for the managers. So many reasons for managers leaving their company is, oh well, it was just too much. There was too much expected of me, and if anything went wrong, I had no support, and I'd only ever speak to my leadership team, my ops director or whatever, when we were at crisis point, and I couldn't cope anymore. Or they'll be crying out for staff and there's no budget, they're not told what they can do, they don't know what their remit is, so they struggle along and the rest of the staff team get overworked. And ultimately it's lack of support and understanding from that leadership team. So it's about, when you're hiring a manager or promoting a deputy up, or you've got an existing manager, it's those regular check-ins to see what's working well, what's not working well, where can we support you, how can we support you better, and is there a training gap there? Have a look. Is this manager really good with people, but their quality isn't quite where it needs to be? Rather than that escalating into an absolute whirlwind of chaos and the home or service going into a bad CQC rating for whatever reason, harness that quickly and look and say, right, this manager needs some training and development in quality assurance, compliance, and look at it that way. You might identify a really strong deputy manager. I would encourage any employer to jump on that employee sooner rather than later and start talking to them about, have you ever considered doing your level 4, level 5? How would you feel if we put you forward for that and you started it? Because you're not only giving them that kind of praise that we've recognized you're really good at something, you're kind of guaranteeing their employment for another however long that training is going to be, and your succession planning for your own business should another managerial position come up. So as an ops director or a regional manager, you should, I know there's a lot to do with the social care, and this is kind of, someone's probably going to sit there thinking, oh, because we've all got time for that. But believe me, if you kind of make time once a month for a one-to-one and a catch-up and a check-in with your direct reports on, yes, the operational side of the business, but also their emotional well-being, their personal development, it will aid your retention 100%, as long as whatever outcomes come from that one-to-one are actioned, if they're reasonable actions. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about checking in and actioning what will motivate your employees.
Yeah, and I mean that goes across sector, doesn't it? We could say that about any sector, because
Yeah.
There's if you look at the Gallup workforce report for last year, there's some fascinating statistics in terms of engagement. But one of the key themes that comes out of there is how performance management is used. Now, as soon as you say that phrase, people go to the negative and performance management is how to get rid of people. Actually, what we should be talking about, or what we talk about, is performance management as a positive culture, because actually it is those check-ins, it is making sure that everybody's got that personal development plan and is on that journey, and it's keeping those communication lines open, and making sure we're using it as time to make sure they've got everything they need and that their well-being is right, because as you say, we all have ups and downs, don't we? We're not in the age where leave work at home. Leave home at the door when you get to work. It just doesn't work like that.
No.
And people talk about work-life balance, work-life blend. You can talk about it however you want to, but ultimately, if we're not giving people the space they need, and that goes for any level, managers or what have you, then we are going to lose those people. So we've definitely got to train people, and that's the other thing. Not having time for training, we hear that all of the time. But if we look at the difference between an apprenticeship or gaining the qualification, in the apprenticeship, you're utilising that to make a difference in the workplace. So actually, the work that you are doing is contributing to that learning, and vice versa.
It is work-based learning. Yeah,
so
you're not being taken off the job.
Part of part of your job, rather than thinking about it. I've got to do this and I've got to do this, because they're so incredibly intertwined. Ultimately, as you say, succession planning, moving the business forwards in terms of strategy, it's going to help all of those things. Wow. Okay.
And in addition to the formal qualifications, it's give it almost like a toolkit, a managerial toolkit, so that yes, your regional managers they follow the same process with their managers, but then the managers within the services are following that same process with their direct reports, your care and support staff, so that you're maintaining that retention at all levels. So formal training development and robust internal toolkits, so everyone knows their remit, everyone knows what they can and what they should or shouldn't be doing. It can sound like a big ask, but it's a small change that really does add value long term.
And that retention, when we if you look at the skills for care reports and how many vacancies and how many more staff we're going to need in the care sector by 2030, we've talked about vacancy numbers now, but we're going to add 300,000 more jobs that we're going to need to fill. So we can't afford to be losing people at the rate we are if we're going to move forward into that. There's some really key bits there. So thank you for that. It's incredibly important. And how often do we see that people are promoted into the next level before we've given them the training, because they've been there the longest, or because they have demonstrated incredible skills in that? Not saying they don't rightly deserve a promotion, but as organisations, we need to be looking at preparing those people before they move into that role. So
Mm,
actually the transition is
absolutely.
much easier. And again, that
Yeah.
retention,
And they
because
feel more confident when they step up
yeah,
into that role, and therefore they've already got that confidence that actually, yeah, I'm ready for this because they've lived it for on the training
yeah,
beforehand. So absolutely. And even the amount of candidates that I see leaving the deputy manager positions to go elsewhere, and their reason being is, oh well, because I want to progress to management, but my company won't support my level 4, my level 5. And I just think it's such a sad state of affairs. I mean, the salesperson in me is then thinking, well, let me speak to that employer when they leave to talk about how they can work on their retention and attraction. But as a recruiter who's been in social care for so long, it's kind of like it's almost frustrating, because you think you've got someone here who's desperate for it,
yeah.
unless there's a legitimate reason and they're abysmal at their job. But that's not often the case. Often the case is someone's been at deputy manager level for 2-3 years at the same company. They're leading a really strong workforce. There's no other issues in the home, yet they feel held back, so they leave. And it's such a loss to that business, but it's a gain to someone else who's then going to support their career development.
And even if you look at it so black and white as the cost.
Yeah.
So if you think about how much it costs to train somebody
Mm-hmm.
and how much it costs to recruit somebody,
Mm.
if you're making sure you're training that person, you're never gonna, you're not gonna have that recruitment cost. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, you're gonna need to spend less on that training and development than
Mm.
you will to recruit new candidates, train people into that role. You think about a whole period of a new individual coming into an organization, there's a
Yeah.
huge cost to doing that. So, even if you go as
It's not
simple as
just the
that,
recruitment fee, it's the
yeah,
time that position is vacant, who's having to step up, what's being neglected during that period. Because if someone's stepping up, that leaves another gap below them, and it's the time taken to interview and this, that, the other. I
yeah,
mean, I know I'm talking myself out of a situation here, but it's
yeah,
true. As a recruiter, the best scenarios are when you're recruiting for growth and you're not having to recruit for a replacement,
yeah.
because that is that's the dream. The company's growing, it's doing well, it's got a really stable workforce. We need a new head because of X, Y, and Z. Fantastic. When it's a replacement, you're up against it, because yes, this client's going to have a fee, but equally, what I don't want them to have is a 4 or 5 or 6 week period whereby there's no one doing that job, because what on earth is going to go wrong in that time, because there's so much.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Ultimately it comes down to what's best for the sector, and
yeah.
ultimately we're all here for the end user, the service users
Mm-hmm.
of whether it's adult care, childcare, wherever it's at.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately this all impacts the service we can provide to the people who matter. So
Yes.
yeah, whilst you're doing a really good job of convincing yourself out of work, as you say, there's still plenty, because if we are doing all of these things, growth is going to come, and
It's
quite
going to come
naturally,
naturally.
you
Yeah,
know because you're
exactly.
going to want more people coming to use the service because they can feel the culture. You're going to want
Yeah.
more people coming to work for you because they can see what you're delivering.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really important. But these are the conversations we're having internally, and
It
so
is.
we need to get them out there.
Yeah, yeah. And it's conversations I'm having with my clients. Isn't it? Anyone in recruitment will tell you now that the market's tough. Outside of social care, I know there's other areas that are struggling, but obviously I've lived and breathed this for so long. So now it's the conversations are shifting, and it's, oh, well, how can we stabilize the workforce so that
Yeah,
this doesn't happen? Or is there a flight risk? And we're looking at what that flight risk, who that flight risk is, and trying to rescue it before it happens. So looking at the training options, looking at what the process is internally to make sure that person doesn't go. And this is where we can add value on that front as well. It's not just about filling vacancies. It's trying
yeah.
to
Well,
stabilize the sector
it comes
that's
down to
really
all of the individual needs of both
yeah,
businesses and colleagues within those businesses,
yeah.
doesn't it? I mean, there's that famous Richard Branson quote, isn't it? That train them well enough so
Yes.
they can leave, but
Yeah.
treat them well enough so they don't want to. If
Mm-hmm.
we look at it like that,
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to a very simple premise. Fab.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've talked about loads in terms of retention, in terms of the other strategies we can take, because we know, can't throw money at this. We are not in an affluent sector. We're in a sector that is struggling every day to, make
Mm-hmm.
sure we can manage those costs. But one thing, and you mentioned it a little bit because you talked about why managers talk to you about why they leave. There's too much on them, you know, they're experiencing burnout. We hear that word all of the time at the moment.
Oh yeah.
And you've mentioned in terms of making sure we've got that place to talk in terms of the regular catch-ups, you know, whatever we title them. But is there any other tips for employers about prioritising staff well-being and helping reduce that burnout, do you think?
Absolutely. And again, it links back to what I've spoke to previously. It's about living and breathing your employer values. If you are positioning yourself as an advocate for employee mental health and well-being, but the pillar that supports that is you've got is it an employee assistance program or access to an app that provides mental health care, but there's no feet on the ground actually investing time in it's diluted and your staff aren't feeling it 100%. So that value, if you're really selling that value, and it's a big one in this sector, because the people in these services oftentimes they've got their own families that they see a lot less than they do of the people that they're providing the care for and they're working with, and things go wrong in our personal lives. That we experience losses, we experience births, marriages, you know, there's so much that goes on outside of work that as an employer, and now more than ever, we have to embrace that, because if you're not, someone else is. So yes, you've got an employee assistance program. Yes, you've got access to mental health care via an app or an online GP, whatever it may be. But those individual check-ins, and you don't need to have 17 different check-ins. If you're having one check-in a month, like a monthly one-to-one, and it covers off how are things at home, do you need this, do you need any support here, how are the hours, etc., etc. It's making sure that you are showing that you support people outside of work. And no, we can't offer people 40 days holiday a year in this sector. It's just not feasible. But have your birthday off. If you move house, have 2 days additional extra leave, so that those big life events are covered, but it's not as a huge cost to a business. And it helps, it gives that feeling of support and unity, and do you know what, they do value me, and I do know that if life gets a little bit tough outside of work, I'm not going to lose my job because of it. I know that I've got that support, so that fear factor isn't there, and it just has this positive psychological impact on the workforce at all levels. And it should be at all levels, 100% at all levels, not just your senior leadership team. It has to be through and through the business. So, you know, an understanding culture. I'm very aware that there are instances where it's taken to the nth degree and people possibly abuse the situation and think, oh well, they won't know I'm not moving house, I'm just going to say I'm moving house. And it's making sure that you can identify when someone are kind of taking it a little bit too far and taking advantage of how understanding the business is being. But ultimately, again, it comes down to how you've trained your deputies, your managers, your senior managers on how to handle personal life circumstances.
But it comes down to those relationships, doesn't it? And if we're not making time to have those conversations, we can't build those relationships, so we don't build the trust. So, you know, it's that catalogue, you know, that kind of domino effect. Yeah, it made me think in terms of when you talked about mental health, we talk about well-being being paramount, you know, a few years ago, and you know, we do still see it. But it was really about that, right? Well, okay, mental health is the, you know, big topic of conversation. So businesses went out and trained lots of staff in mental health first aid, which is absolutely fantastic. Do not get me wrong, but they went to the training before looking at, what is this, you know, actually looking at that wellbeing strategy, and is this what we need? Mental health first aid training is incredible. You know, we've done a lot of it. We have a lot of trained people within the organisation to both work with our learners, but also work with our teams and what have you. And the value of it is huge. But you've really got to understand what it is you're trying to achieve in doing this. And we see this, don't we? Like, we'll put a sticking plaster. So we'll go to this is the next watchword, we'll do this training. Actually, we really need to get to the grips with what are our team feeling, what are our colleagues feeling. And so it's gaining that feedback. I tell you, we get all sorts of visitors now when we're in meetings, don't we? But it is getting that real understanding. How often do we, and not just on a one-to-one basis, but bigger, how often do we take the opportunity or go and seek the opportunity to get feedback? Because unless we're actually getting feedback from our colleagues on what real situation is, we're assuming things and we might be putting the wrong solution in place. So, that's, for me, that's really key as well, is making sure we're engaging in those conversations with teams.
100% agreed. And equally, I've actually had this, I've said these words to a client before. Do you find yourself one of these organizations that says, oh God, we best go and do that training? Because if you are, you're not buying into it. And you do it's for the wrong
it doesn't
reasons.
have the value that you're looking for.
And I've had one client say, do you know what, we're guilty of that. We have done that.
And let's be honest, we all will have done it at some point.
Of course. Oh God, we best get that done. We best, when GDPR came in, we best get that done. But now look how it's so important that we follow it. But I think there's a lot of people that didn't take it seriously at the time. And I think the biggest thing for clients is they don't feel they have the time to work on the communications of how they're going to roll things out. Don't think they've got the time to take people off the floor to just really talk about their ethos and what culture they're trying to build. And it doesn't have to be done that way. If anything, you can, rather than paying a recruiter to replace somebody, you can have a business consultant come in once a month and they can do all these check-ins with somebody, which often works better because they're in a safer space, because it's someone who's not directly working for the company. So they'll offload as much as they can to a third party who can then take it away, digest it, put a kind of action plan together, present it to the senior management team and the board and say, look, if you don't do this, you're going to lose a really good member of the team, and holds the leadership team to account on delivering on those actions and signpost them in the direction of how to implement things or how to communicate things so that it's heard and felt through the organization. Because that's another key. People can hear it, but if they don't feel it, they will vote with their feet and they will go, because it's just lip service and people don't take to it very well. So it is again, goes back to that. What are your values? How are you living and breathing them? Are you communicating it? Are you training your workforce to be able to live and breathe them as well and follow them also? And making this whole culture fully embedded in the business. So I could go on and on, and probably will.
And again, we come to that short-term, long-term view, don't we? Like we did before with recruitment, recruit for now or recruit for the future. But the same goes here. Yes, on a day-to-day basis, trying to step back from the business, it's hard. But if you don't make that time, it's going to cost more. You're going to lose people. You're going to lose time. You're going to lose all of those things. And as you say, it might be independent. It might be how you decide to do it in the business, but it's got to be done to move forward. It's one of those, take a step back to take 5 steps forward. And we've got to make that time. The only people, are the decision makers, the leaders of businesses that can make those and say, actually, no, we do need to take a step back. And that'll look different for every business. But there's loads of innovative solutions about. And that's my next question. Can you think of any examples where you've seen some really innovative solutions, whether it be to recruitment or retention, or what organisations have done in the real world to make a difference?
So I guess that leads on quite nicely. So let's take a larger organisation that I'd spoken to, and they were recruiting for a number of managers all over the country, and this, that, the other, and their kind of briefing call was good. They went through the details of the services they were managing, the kind of the top level information that you'd need. This is the size of the service, this is CQC rating, this is how many staff are there. But then I wanted to get into the granular detail of, okay, well, what's the dynamic of the team in this service, and what in this particular instance, I was talking to an internal recruitment team. a member of the team. What's the dynamic of this team down in this area, for example? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been there. Okay, well, can I talk to the hiring manager, the manager of the service, just so I can get an idea? Oh, no, it's all dealt with by us. Absolutely fine. But you've got to recruit people that fit in that team. You've got to be able to do it. So anyway, we had a number of managerial posts and we were working on it, and it's like, okay, well, what are the kind of benefits? What's the culture? What are your values? I will email it over. No, I want you to tell me, because when you're interviewing these candidates, you're going to have to tell them. Oh, we'll just email the package to them. And it's like, no, it needs to be communicated so that people can get that buy-in and can hear how that passion comes across, so that they can see actually they sound really proud to work for that company. And that case study was really good. Oh, well, we haven't really got any cases. So anyway, I kind of, my little, not alarm bells, but my little light bulb was going off in the back of my head, thinking there's a real opportunity here to better this process. In which case I went to one of the directors and said, can we just have a chat? I think I've got an opportunity here that can help us have more success in the hiring process and attract more candidates. And we had a chat, and they kind of said that we're just too big to be able to roll out this culture and train everybody on this and this and da da da. So I said, the solution I gave was, one person doesn't need to do all of this. You just need to identify some champions that will be able to do it. And then that gives them some responsibility. They feel part of a kind of committee of champions that are championing the employee values and the attraction and retention. And you're giving them a bit of responsibility. And they are then in turn sharing that with the people around them, who naturally will start. It's like that herd mentality. If you get one champion, they will start to infiltrate the rest of the team. So you don't need one person traveling the whole country banging the drum about, these are our employee values, you must say this. It's getting a community within the business that fully support what the culture you want to achieve, and they will shout that from the rooftops for you. Have your committee meetings, have your idea forums, and bring things to the table. Have someone take responsibility for how that's communicated to the wider business. Celebrate the successes when you hire somebody as a result of this new culture shift. And it's, rather than being focused on hiring, CQC outcomes, it's right. If we've got happy, strong teams, the results will follow. Honest to God, they will. And that goes for any workplace environment.
And what a great opportunity to, succession plan and see potential leaders of the future. If people want to take on that role and want to volunteer for that role and become a champion, then you're already on a journey with that person to their next stage, aren't you? So,
and do you know what's even worked sometimes? I mean, it's a risk and it's a bit rogue, but I've seen people who have been a little bit obstructive when it comes to change, and a little bit like, oh God, it's all nonsense, I'm not doing that. If you make them a champion of something, they come into their own, and all of a sudden that mindset shifts from a negative to, oh, actually, I've got some responsibility here, and what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing and what the company are trying to do is actually making me feel a bit better about it. So that person that's usually an earworm does a 360 and they then become your biggest champion. I wouldn't advise it in all circumstances, but I have seen it work, and it has paid off.
But taking people on the journey makes a difference, doesn't it? You said before, when you were talking about all of these things, to get people to buy in, ultimately it comes down to why. Why are we doing it? If we don't tell that story well enough of why, and also show people what difference it's going to make to them as an individual, because that's the bit you mentioned before, was they want to know how it's going to impact them. Because we all do. We're naturally human beings.
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? How's it going to impact me? What am I going to gain from it? All of those things. Well, if you can show that to somebody who has a voice, and whether they choose to use that for the good or the bad, we need to get them on the side of using it for the good. you know, and as you say, it's going to make a huge difference, because that one negative person, if you don't turn that around, it can put pay to, you know, they talk about 80% of change projects failing because we don't manage it well. But the biggest part of that is not taking people on that journey. So whatever the change is, yeah, it's really important. No, I like that rogue tip. Always love a rogue tip.
No, I'd approach it with caution, but I've seen it work on more than one occasion, and it's worked really, really well. I've even done it in my own teams before, so it is tried and tested. If you kind of get people on board, and like you say, they see the value. People might, another example, so that was with a larger organization who kind of thought, oh, it's just too difficult to roll anything out with, take someone, you know, that was the way around it. And then other clients will look, maybe a much smaller organization, one domiciliary care company, for example, an independent branch. Oh no, there's no issues, and but they were on their third manager in about 18 months. You're like, something's not quite right. You know, I want to help you, but I'm not going to keep placing managers if they're leaving. So what's going on? And when we broke it down, the manager was doing the coordinating, the care shifts, they were doing the business development, the quality, the compliance. They were just doing everything. And it was a very open and honest conversation with the owner of the business of, you know, yes, it might seem like a huge investment by hiring a registered manager and a coordinator at the same time, and a few additional care staff, but it's not going to cost you any more than 3 managers in the last 18 months has. So you might as well just bite the bullet and invest in that head count now. But before you do, let's write a full induction plan, a full employee value proposition. What are your values? How are you going to demonstrate that you're adhering to them and delivering on them, so that we can pitch that to the candidates? And no, they didn't hire. They had a registered manager and a few extra support staff. Then they waited a while longer before getting a coordinator. But ultimately, having that additional support, so the registered manager wasn't having to go out and do the care calls after they'd finished a full day's work from 8 till 6 o'clock, allowed the settling in process to be a lot smoother than the people before had. And they put in a target in place that said, once the branch is delivering this amount of care hours, at that point you can recruit your care coordinator. So there were those clear parameters from the offset of, this is how many care staff we've got, this is how often you'll have to do on call, all the time in this instance, because they're the only next senior person, and at this amount of hours you can get a care coordinator. And they delivered on that. The client had upheld their promise, delivered on that, and as far as I'm aware, that manager's still there today, and the branch is doing very well. But it took a good 18 months of it's kind of these losses, people leaving, before the client was like, okay, right, I'm ready to listen, we're ready to make a change. And we built that. I mean, the trust was there, but
that's as hard as anything, isn't it? You know, that listening to, because, well, we've always done it this way. They just haven't been the right people. Trying to break that mindset. But again, it comes back to that taking a step back, doesn't it? Because whatever sector you work in, new rules, new regulations, you know, changes to how we have to do things because people are telling us, just means we just keep adding stuff. We don't take the chance to go back and reflect and go, does this process or does this role still work in its entirety? You do have to take that step back and go, what's not working? Or, you know, if we started this again, I always say it's a great question to ask. If we started this business again, or we introduced this role again, what would we want it to be? Because only then do you say, oh God, well, that's what it should be, but they're doing this, and they're doing the other, and they're doing all this process. Actually, it goes through 3 people before it gets to there. Why on earth does it not go from there to there? Ultimately, it comes back to, how are we impacting our service users? How are we impacting our colleagues on a day-to-day basis? What are we trying to achieve, and how are we trying to achieve it? But if we break it all down and take that opportunity to go, you know, if we were to start again, how would we do it differently? We haven't got all of the boundaries that we create for ourselves over time, so we need to take it. It's so important to take that step back, isn't it?
Absolutely. Taking stock regularly, because the climate changes,
Yeah.
we've got an aging workforce, an aging population.
Okay. Yeah.
This job isn't going to get quieter.
Yeah.
It's not. And, from adult services, we're entering a period where it will be, it's already pushed to its max, but there is going to be more strain. Children's residential services and children and younger person supported living services, the need for them is so huge already, and this severe lack of qualified or trained candidates to lead those services effectively it's borderline scary. So
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to a big question for the last one there.
yeah.
So as you've said, we've got an aging population, so adult care getting busier. We've seen statistics over the last couple of years with more children going into care,
Sadly, yeah.
so a need for a greater workforce. We've seen the statistics which says what we're going to need by 2030. All of it is telling us we need more. So
yeah.
what long-term strategies, and if we think to, the I suppose how the sector is seen, how people look at jobs in sector. Actually, you and I know it is a vocation and it's careers in sector, because you have to be so passionate about making a difference to this sector. What long-term kind of strategies does the sector really need to consider to be encouraging more young people to get into those entry-level roles, but also for people to stay in sector and make the difference that they're coming to make?
For me, it's being a little bit more open-minded with your recruitment and your attraction methods, and especially if you're looking at kind of entry level, investing in that training for people who aren't necessarily qualified and making that an enjoyable experience for them, celebrate it with them, encourage that success and give them a clear career pathway so that they're not joining you and then kind of just feel a little bit left by the wayside, and then they qualify and it's like, oh well, now I've got this qualification, I'm going to see if I can go elsewhere. Again, it's that culture of we see you, we hear you, we value you, and delivering on that as best you can. We appreciate that additional heads, so having kind of your wellbeing champions employed on a full-time contract isn't possible. So your workforce have got to be the people that are supporting one another. So yeah, I think looking at the bigger picture, using the tech that we've got available, access to social media, the marketing campaigns you can use, the road shows you can go on, the colleges you can go and visit, sharing those case studies, getting the kind of YouTube videos where possible of staff interacting with your service users and days out, and what the fun side of this sector. People in social care provide care for the most vulnerable people in society who in some instances don't see another face other than their carer or support worker all day. Like it's such a rewarding career. Sadly, it's one that comes with immense pressure, not the best pay. But if we can get more people into the sector by training them properly, really championing their achievements and succession planning and developing them in your businesses, that in turn should bring more people to the sector, keep them there, and then allow for more package referrals, therefore more money generated for your business, and then slight uplifts in pay, so they're not then going to a supermarket down the road thinking, well, this is so much easier than dealing with the challenging behaviours that I have to deal with. It's really trying to build an environment that people feel valued and can and do thrive in. I know it sounds easy for me to sit here and say that, but it doesn't have to be this huge project of we're overhauling everything. Small changes in the right direction every single day, that's all it takes.
And people seeing those small things, as you say, I really like the phrase that you use: we see you, we hear you, we value you, and we live up to it. and all of our actions show that. We're seeing a generation come into the workforce that actually, yes, everybody needs to earn money, we all need to live, and we know the cost of living is increasing. However, we have got a generation coming through who want to work to make a difference. So see the social value. Actually, when you talk to young people about, what they want to do, no, they might not want to know what the career is, but they do want to go and make a difference. So they want to work with people, or they want, the first thing is not necessarily, I want to earn this amount of money. There are ways in which they could do that, but there is this real social value.
I'd like to think that's we help on that front from the training point of view, because we can signpost learners in directions of where their career can go, and having trusted partners who will champion that with us. So we've got learners on our courses, they're brand new to it, they want to try it. Having clients that will say, yeah, when they're finished, send them our way, we'll take them, we'll support them. And knowing us, being confident that that is an employer that, we know that they will support them, actually, because we don't want someone to finish on our training and then go somewhere and have a dire experience, because then it's like, well, I was sold the dream by Acacia Training, and then I've gone here and it's absolutely the complete opposite. So it's just working in unison with as a business, your training provider, your recruitment partner, your business consultants, and making sure that you're all in it for the greater good of the end user and the candidates and you as a business.
But the difference it makes to train from, ground up. We've brought so many trainees into our company, and actually taking people on that journey, whatever that journey is, whatever the role is, you not only get that buy into the culture, but you've trained somebody in your ways and your methodologies. It's like, teaching somebody a skill they've already learned and they've got all of these bad habits, trying to change those or put the right habits in the beginning makes a difference culturally, 100%. But also to the service and the quality that you're delivering. So, okay. We could continue to talk.
Before we go, I've just had a little thought as well. Another thing that I'd say to clients regularly, in every walk of life, when you're at an exec or director level, you were a trainee once. And if you've worked your way up in this sector, another like onboarding tip I've used before is having people in those senior positions that have equally worked from support worker, have them talk about how rewarding the career can be, not just financially, but the people you've helped, the journeys you've been on. That is a really impactful kind of message from the CEO to a cohort that you might be taking on, for example.
And not only internally does that make a difference to your recruitment process. Ultimately, we all know we're in this for the sector. We're not in this for any individual benefit. If we can get more of those stories out into the world, and we're working hard to get more of those employer stories out into the world and showcase what our incredible partners do, because if we don't get that message out, how are people going to find out, and how are they going to see it as a career? And
for every good news story you hear in social care, sadly, you turn the news on and there'll be 3 bad stories. So it can feel like you're pushing treacle up a hill, but the more people that are sharing the good stories, it'll start to drown out some of that negative noise. And I think it's about doing it as a collective, rather than one person just trying to do it all by themselves.
If we all take the attitude of being a force for good in the world, ultimately we're all going to reap the benefits of that. We might not see it immediately, but actually it's going to make such a difference to the sector. Ultimately, there are so many more positive stories in the care sector than there are negative, but because of, as you say, how the media works, they only go into those ones. But if we can all make a commitment to just do one good thing that says something good about the sector this week, God, the amount of difference that would make it be like a title. It really would.
I think we got about 30 odd thousand care homes for the elderly in the UK. Can you imagine one good news story being shared?
Oh my God, for
every
everyone
single day. Insane. So
Oh yeah. Well, we're going to start that today. So definitely going to start that today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure we'll have many more opportunities and many more topics to talk about coming forward. Absolutely. But as we could go on and on and just talk about the sector for the next couple of hours, I think we probably need to draw it to a close.
Yeah.
But it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for all of the tips that you've shared. They'll be invaluable for people, and it's really important. So I look forward to the next time.
Me too. Thanks, Em. Bye.